So this week, we find that Zoe Quinn is back in the news. She's back in the headlines, and for those of you not familiar with Zoe Quinn, she is the woman around which the entire Gamergate controversy and movement kind of revolved around. And in a way, she was the catalyst for this organic, cultural black swan event. That's what Gamergate was. It was a reaction to an increasingly hostile critique of the industry and of the community by the journalist class, and also coming from Twitter and Tumblr and the more vocal elements of the far left on the internet. We were an apolitical community for the majority of the existence of gaming, and for a lot of us this was a wake-up call. It kind of showed us how dishonest the press can be. It inadvertently exposed the moral bankruptcy of the neoliberal left. And in a lot of ways, it was kind of baby's first red pill for a lot of millennials. Because once you realize how dishonest and corrupt journalism can be, the lack of ethics and the lack of accountability, and once you've witnessed just the raw contempt that a lot of these leftist radicals have for any and all criticism and opposition, it's really hard to go back to just enjoying video games and tuning out the larger political implications of this new perspective, of these revelations. For a lot of us, Gamergate was the beginning of a descent down a rabbit hole which would expose us to new ways of looking at the world, a counter-narrative to this subversive, far-left Marxist critique of not just gaming but of Western culture in general. And Matt Lees described this phenomenon in his Guardian article, which accused Gamergate of being an insidious pipeline to the alt-right, that Gamergate and gaming in general was a radicalizing force which turned disenfranchised, alienated young white men into far-right extremists, antisocial individuals who are a danger to society. This is kind of like the journalists' counter to being accused of nepotism, corruption, lack of ethics. They are all too aware that if they address the core complaints that gamers have with not only their politics but also just the politics of mainstream culture in general, that would be like a tacit admission of culpability, of responsibility. It would validate the Gamergate narrative, and it would of course be an admission of defeat, and that's kind of why the left on the internet refuse to engage with Gamergate in an intellectually honest fashion. They continue to argue against the straw man of their own creation, this representation of Gamergate being a anti-woman, racist, targeted harassment campaign focused on causing nothing but strife for minorities and women in the gaming space. And the narrative that Gamergate led directly to the rise of the alt-right and the election of Donald Trump, that's kind of like their newest addition to the anti-Gamergate lore. And I have to say, there is some truth to this idea, because, I mean, they believe that this underground contingent of neck-bearded, Cheeto dust-covered spurgs shitposted Donald Trump into the presidency. And without Gamergate, there wouldn't have been that mimetic energy required to meme that orange man into the highest position in the Western world, right? And you know what? You're welcome. That's the hilarious thing about these radical leftists too, is that they've inadvertently created their worst nightmare. And it's this lack of self-awareness, this refusal to engage with criticism and reality, right? It causes them to double down again and again, and the stakes are constantly raised. The specter of fascism and Hitler is wheeled out at every opportunity because these people are desperate. They did not expect any pushback. When you look at it like this, it's like, okay, fine. Let's pretend that we agree 100% with these insane people and their rationale. All right. Well then, who's really responsible? It almost seems like you're saying that without Zoe Quinn kicking off this shit show, that, you know what, we could have avoided World War III. We could have avoided the impending second Holocaust, right? But hey, I mean, Zoe had to fucking open her big mouth, right? Damn it, Zoe. And for those of you not familiar with Zoe Quinn's controversial history in the industry, let's take a trip back through memory lane. And let's recall the Zoe post. It was a blog post written by one of her ex-boyfriends. And he alleged not only did she cheat on him many times, but that she was involved in a 5-way relationship with journalists and developers in the industry, and engaging in a kind of quid pro quo, very shady situation where she would receive positive press and other perks in exchange for sexual favors, right? So it's not a good look for Zoe. But ultimately, this is the thing that kicked off Gamergate, because she ended up becoming a tool of the egghead journalists. They used this story as proof that gamers are these toxic male woman haters, and that how dare gamers pick on Zoe? How dare we criticize her sex life? So that is the way the media framed it. They framed this as a feminist issue, that gamers calling out the obvious ethical quandary, the obvious corruption and nepotism going on between Zoe and these journalists, that's an example of misogyny. So that's where this anti-Gamergate narrative was born. And following the Zoe post, we were inundated with a barrage of gamers are dead articles coming from almost every mainstream news publication in the industry. And that, of course, was the true catalyst. It's that we recognized the spin, and then when we pointed out that these journalists were lying, they doubled down, like they always do, and they tried to stamp us out. And that it's like kicking a hornet's nest. We just got more and more frustrated, and more willing to stand up and call out these hypocrites. And the rest is history. And Zoe, I mean, she was more than willing to play along, to play the victim, and she made a career out of it. She milked this false narrative for all it was worth. And she's made a fortune over the last couple of years. She had a Kickstarter which raised over $85,000, never delivered on the game, and there's an army of white knights and even industry veterans that will rush to her defense if anyone points this out. She's been lionized as some kind of feminist icon because of the years of mental anguish and abuse that she's suffered at the hands of the toxic white male gamer, right? And I was in San Francisco a couple of years ago, and she was signing autographs in a bookstore I walked past, and I'm just looking in there going, we really are living in clown world. I mean, Zoe Quinn is famous for being a total slut, and then lying about it. Because hashtag believe all women, because of this insane progressive standard that women are not responsible for their actions and they are immune to all criticism. And it's this movement that carried her all the way to the UN, where she gave a speech about quote-unquote cyber violence. So, she's the expert, right? And as I mentioned before, she's back in the news this week, and we have publications that are announcing that this is Gamergate 2.0, because guess what? She's been harassed again. She's been targeted again. It's more harassment, more victimization, this time at the hands of an indie game developer behind some kind of survival game, not familiar with it, but hey, he just got Me Too'd, and Zoe is ready to absolutely destroy this man's career and pander to this alien, Marxist, subversive bullshit that is destroying the industry. And we've watched this happen in comedy, it's happened in music, it's happened in sci-fi, it's happened in Magic the Gathering. Almost every majority white, majority male subculture has been subverted and dismantled using this method. So we'll see if this really does lead to a Gamergate 2.0, because frankly, I think that would be kind of exciting. In the post-Trump world, things are as chaotic as they've ever been, and I feel like a resurrection of the specter of Gamergate would be immensely entertaining. Men are unable to sneeze in their working environment without being accused of sexual assault, so things are getting very fucked up, and I think it's time to blow off a little more steam. I think a Gamergate 2.0 would be, frankly, it'd be a laugh. I think we need to push back again. I feel like they didn't get the message the first time around. They didn't get the message with Trump. And by all predictions, it looks like he's going to win again in 2020. Now, I'm not even a big Trump fan. I like the guy. I think his policies are frankly a little milquetoast. I think that his foreign policy is kind of bullshit, and he hasn't built any wall, and he's not really on top of the immigration situation, despite his campaign promises. But you know what? I hope he wins, because I want to hear the futile, impotent rage. I want to hear the whining and the crying. It's going to be music to my ears, frankly. It'll be like listening to a beautiful fucking Beethoven symphony. It will bring a tear to my eye. And that's just it, Zoe. Why did you make me do this, I just wanted to play video games. But reluctantly, I and my fellow gamers, we will rise up again and we will smack down these retarded commies. We're gonna do it again. There's nothing that anyone can do about it. We got the new Star Wars coming out soon, and the backlash to the new Star Wars films, it echoes Gamergate in a lot of ways. The fandom menace, they're calling it. It's been immensely entertaining watching that backlash unfold, and I couldn't agree more with guys like Mueller and Ethan. And in parallel to that, we've had Comicsgate, Richard C. Meyer leading this charge and resistance against the absolute cuckification of comic books, right? So really, it's become clear just how potent Gamergate really was as a cultural movement. And the legacy, it's empowered people, nerds, white male nerds, to stand up and reject these attempts at ideological subversion that are coming from the far left into our subcultures, into our daily lives. And frankly, I can't wait for the next consumer revolt, the next big backlash, because harvesting the salt is half the fun. My Austrian watercolor painting uncle would call it Schadenfreude.